The courtroom was cold and gray, just like the faces of the officers who sat behind the long metal table. Danny Marsh stood alone in the center of the room, his hands bound in front of him, his uniform stripped of all its medals and patches. He was 26 years old, and his life was about to end in every way that mattered. The head judge, a woman with silver hair and eyes like chips of ice, read from a digital tablet without looking at him. She spoke of duty. She spoke of loyalty. She spoke of the sacred trust that every soldier owed to the Galactic Covenant. And then she spoke of his crime. Danny had refused to fire. 3 weeks ago, his unit had been ordered to destroy a refugee transport. The ship was carrying 800 people fleeing from a war zone, but intelligence reports claimed that enemy spies were hidden among them. The order was simple. Destroy the ship. Kill everyone. Let the spies die along with the innocent. Danny's finger had been on the trigger. He could still feel the cold metal against his skin when he closed his eyes. 800 people. Men, women, children. Families who had already lost everything, now running for their lives. He could not do it. He had lowered his weapon. He had refused the direct order of his commanding officer. And because of his hesitation, other soldiers had hesitated too. The transport had escaped. The refugees had lived, and now Danny would pay the price. Corporal Danny Marsh, the judge said, finally looking at him with those cold eyes. You are hereby found guilty of insubordination and dereliction of duty. You are stripped of your rank and all honors. You are sentenced to permanent exile on HFY. May you find time to consider your choices in the silence of that world. HFY. Danny had heard of it. Everyone had. It was a frozen planet on the edge of known space, a place where the Covenant sent people it wanted to forget. No one ever came back from HFY. No one ever even tried. They gave him 1 hour to record a message for his family. He sat in a small room with a camera pointed at his face, and he tried to find the right words. Mom, he said, his voice cracking. Dad, Kelly, I know you probably won't understand what I did. Maybe you'll be ashamed of me. But I want you to know that I made a choice, and I stand by it. There were children on that ship. Babies. I couldn't kill them. I just couldn't. He paused, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. I love you all. Take care of Buster for me. And Kelly, finish school. Make something of yourself. Don't end up like your stupid brother. He tried to smile, but it came out wrong. He ended the recording and sat in silence until they came for him. The journey to HFY took 6 days. Danny spent most of it alone in a small cell, staring at the gray walls and thinking about the life he was leaving behind. He thought about his mother's garden back on Earth, the way the tomatoes grew so red and ripe in the summer sun. He thought about his father's workshop, the smell of sawdust and machine oil. He thought about Kelly's laugh, loud and bright like bells ringing. He would never see any of them again. When the ship finally arrived at HFY, Danny was escorted to the cargo bay by 2 guards who did not speak to him. They handed him a survival pack and a thermal suit, then opened the outer door. The cold hit him like a physical blow. It was beyond anything he had ever experienced, a cold that seemed to reach inside his body and squeeze his very bones. The world outside was white and gray, nothing but snow and ice and distant mountains that looked like the teeth of some enormous beast. Good luck, one of the guards said. There was no kindness in his voice. It was just something to say. Danny stepped out onto the frozen ground. The door closed behind him. The ship rose into the sky and disappeared into the clouds. And then he was alone. For the first few hours, Danny simply walked. He did not know where he was going. There was nowhere to go. But walking felt better than standing still, better than thinking about everything he had lost. The thermal suit kept him alive, but just barely. The temperature on HFY was far below freezing, and the wind cut through every gap in his clothing like tiny knives. By the time the pale sun began to set, Danny knew he needed to find shelter, or he would die. He found a cave in the side of a rocky cliff, just large enough for him to squeeze inside. The walls were made of black stone that seemed to hold a faint warmth, and Danny pressed himself against them gratefully. He ate a small portion of his rations and drank some water from his supply, knowing he would need to find more soon. That first night was the longest of his life. The wind howled outside like a wounded animal, and strange sounds echoed through the darkness. Danny did not sleep. He just sat there, knees pulled to his chest, waiting for morning. But morning came, and Danny was still alive. Days passed, then weeks. Danny learned to survive on this frozen world through trial and error, through stubbornness and desperation. He discovered that small creatures live beneath the ice, burrowing animals with thick fur and fatty meat. He learned to trap them using wire from his survival kit. He learned which ice was safe to melt for water and which was contaminated with minerals that would make him sick. His thermal suit was failing slowly. The power cells were draining faster than he had hoped, and there was no way to recharge them. Danny knew he had maybe 2 or 3 months before the suit died completely, and then he would freeze to death within hours. But he kept going. He did not know why. There was no rescue coming. There was no hope of escape. But something inside him refused to give up, some stubborn spark that his father had passed down to him. Marsh men don't quit, his dad used to say. We might lose. We might fail. But we don't quit. So Danny did not quit. He explored the cave system, mapping it in his mind, learning its secrets. The caves went deep into the mountain, twisting and turning through the black rock. Some passages led nowhere. Others opened into vast caverns filled with strange crystals that glowed with soft blue light. It was beautiful in its way. Alien and cold and deadly, but beautiful. And then, on the 43rd day of his exile, Danny found something that changed everything. He had gone deeper into the caves than ever before, following his suit's thermal scanner toward a source of heat. Heat meant life on this world. Heat meant survival. What he found was something else entirely. The passage opened into a cavern so large that Danny could not see the ceiling. Blue crystals covered the walls, glowing softly like stars frozen in stone. The light they gave off was gentle and strange, turning everything into shades of blue and silver. But that was not what made Danny stop breathing. In the center of the cavern, resting in a shallow bowl of dark volcanic rock, lay 7 eggs. Each one was bigger than a man's chest, covered in scales that shimmered gold and red even in the blue light. They were beautiful. They were terrifying. They were unlike anything Danny had ever seen. He knew what they were. Everyone in the galaxy knew about the Pirathi, the dragons. They were one of the oldest species in the universe, ancient beyond human understanding. They had ruled a quarter of the galaxy long before humans had learned to make fire. They were powerful, proud, and completely uninterested in the affairs of younger races. The Galactic Covenant had tried many times to make contact with them, to form treaties and alliances, but the Pirathi simply ignored them. They had their own worlds, their own concerns. Humans were like insects to them, too small to notice. But everyone knew that the Pirathi were protective of their eggs. Story said that a Pirathi mother would destroy entire planets to protect her young. Story said that the dragons remembered every wrong done to them, and that their revenge could span centuries. Danny looked around the cavern, his heart pounding. If there were eggs here, where was the mother? He found her near the entrance of the cavern, hidden in a shadow he had walked right past. She was massive, easily 40 meters long, her scales the color of copper and fire. Even dead, she was magnificent. Danny approached slowly, carefully. He could see what had killed her now. There were wounds along her side, burns from energy weapons. Parts of her hide had been cut away, the valuable scales harvested like crops from a field. Poachers. Someone had found this dragon, killed her, and stripped her for parts. Dragon scales were worth more than gold on the black market. A single scale could buy a small ship. An entire dragon hide was worth more than most planets, but they had not found the eggs. Maybe they had been interrupted. Maybe they had not known the eggs were here. Whatever the reason, they had taken what they wanted and left. The mother had crawled back to her nest to die. Danny could see the trail she had left, a smear of dark blood across the stone floor. She had dragged herself all this way, wounded and dying, just to be near her children one last time. Danny stood there for a long moment, looking at the eggs, then at the dead mother, then back at the eggs. The thermal scanner on his suit was still beeping. The eggs were warm, heated by some geological process deep beneath the volcanic rock. But they were not warm enough. Without their mother's fire to keep them heated, they would cool slowly. The embryos inside would die. Danny did not know how long that would take. Days, maybe. A week at most. But it would happen. He thought about walking away. The eggs were not his responsibility. He had his own problems, his own survival to worry about. He had maybe 2 months of power left in his thermal suit, and every bit of that power was precious. But he could not stop looking at the eggs. 7 unborn lives, waiting in the darkness for warmth that would never come. Danny thought about the refuge transport. He thought about the 800 people he had saved by refusing to fire. He thought about the children on that ship, the babies in their mother's arms. "You're going to get me killed," he said to the eggs. "You know that, right?" The eggs did not answer. Of course they did not answer. They were eggs. Danny sighed and sat down next to the nest. He put his hand on the nearest egg, feeling the warmth of the shell through his glove. The scales were smooth and hard, like polished metal. "All right," he said. "Let's see what we can do." He spent the next several hours figuring out the problem. His thermal suit could generate heat. That was what it was designed to do. Normally, it kept that heat close to his body, protecting him from the cold. But he could adjust the settings, redirect the heat outward. He could turn himself into a living furnace. The problem was power. His suit's cells were already draining. If he increased the heat output, they would drain even faster. Much faster. Danny ran the numbers in his head. If he used the suit normally, staying warm and conserving power, he might survive another 8 or 9 weeks. If he cranked up the heat to keep the eggs alive, he would have maybe 3 weeks. Perhaps less. 3 weeks, and then the cold would kill him. He looked at the eggs again. In the blue light, they almost seemed to glow from within. He could imagine the tiny dragons curled up inside, waiting to be born. "My dad always said I was too soft," Danny muttered. Guess he was right. He adjusted the settings on his suit. The power indicator dropped sharply, and a warning message flashed across his display. He ignored it. Then Danny Marsh curled his body around 7 dragon eggs and began to give them his warmth. The first day was not so bad. Danny had food in his pack and water to drink. He talked to the eggs because the silence was too heavy, telling them about his life back on Earth. He told them about his parents, about his sister Kelly, about his dog Buster who loved to chase squirrels. "You would like Earth," he said. "It's warm there." "Well, some parts are warm. Other parts are cold, but not like this. Nothing is cold like this." He told them about the ocean, how it stretched from horizon to horizon, blue and green and endless. He told them about forests filled with trees so tall you could not see the tops. He told them about cities made of glass and steel, where millions of people lived and worked and dreamed. "Humans are strange," he admitted. "We do terrible things sometimes. We hurt each other. We hurt other species. We make so many mistakes." He paused, adjusting his position to cover more of the eggs. But we also do good things. We build. We create. We love. We take care of each other, at least when we remember to. And sometimes, when everything seems hopeless, we find a way to keep going. That's the best thing about us, I think. We don't give up. Even when we should. The eggs did not respond. But Danny liked to think they were listening. Days passed. Danny's food ran out. He managed to trap a few of the burrowing creatures from tunnels near the cavern, but he was growing weaker. The cold was seeping into his bones, despite the suit's best efforts. He could feel his body starting to fail, but the eggs stayed warm. That was what mattered. On the 15th day, Danny noticed something new. One of the eggs had developed a tiny crack along its surface. He watched it for hours, afraid to hope, afraid to believe. More cracks appeared. Then another egg began to crack. Then another. They were going to hatch. Danny smiled, even though it hurt to smile. His lips were cracked and bleeding. His fingers were blackened with frostbite. But he smiled anyway. "Come on," he whispered to the eggs. "Come on out. I want to meet you." Danny had stopped counting the days. Time had become something soft and blurry, like looking through frosted glass. He knew he was dying. He could feel it in his bones, in his lungs, in the way his heart seemed to beat slower with each passing hour. But he could not stop now. Not when he was so close. The eggs were cracking. All 7 of them showed lines spreading across their shells like rivers on a map. Something was moving inside them. Something was alive. Danny pressed himself closer to the nest, trying to give the eggs every bit of warmth his failing body could produce. His thermal suit had died 2 days ago. The power cells were empty, the heating systems cold and useless. Now the only warmth came from Danny himself, from the last reserves of heat in his blood and flesh. It was not enough. He knew it was not enough, but it was all he had. He talked to the eggs constantly now. His voice was weak and rough, barely more than a whisper, but he kept talking because silence felt like giving up. "My mom used to sing to me when I was little," he said. "When I was sick or scared, she would sit by my bed and sing. I wish I could sing for you, but I never learned how. My voice sounds like broken machinery." He coughed, and the cough turned into a fit that left him gasping for air. The cold had gotten into his lungs. He could feel it sitting there, heavy and wet. "I'm sorry," he continued when he could breathe again. "I'm sorry I'm not better at this. I'm sorry I can't do more. But I'm here. That has to count for something, right?" Outside the cavern, a storm was raging. Danny could hear the wind screaming through the tunnels, a sound like all the ghosts of this frozen world crying out at once. Snow was piling up at the entrance, slowly sealing them in. That was probably good. It would keep the worst of the cold out. It would give the eggs a better chance. Danny thought about his family. He wondered if they had gotten his message. He wondered if they understood why he had done what he did, both then and now. Probably not. How could they? He barely understood it himself. He thought about his father, Pete Marsh, who had served in the military for 30 years before retiring. His father was a hard man, stern and demanding, but he had taught Danny everything he knew about survival, about duty, about what it meant to be a man. "A man protects those who cannot protect themselves," his father used to say. That's the job. That's the whole job. Danny had tried to live by those words. He had tried to be the kind of man his father would be proud of. And now here he was, dying on an alien world, curled around a nest of dragon eggs, and he did not regret a single moment of it. "I think you would understand, Dad," he whispered. "I think you would have done the same thing." The cracks in the eggs were growing wider. Danny could see movement through the gaps now, flashes of scales and claws. The dragons inside were fighting to get out, struggling against the shells that had protected them for so long. "That's it," Danny encouraged them. Keep pushing. You're almost there. His vision was starting to blur. The edges of everything had gone soft and gray, like the world was slowly fading away. He knew what that meant. He had seen men die before, in battles and accidents and hospitals. He knew the signs, but not yet. He could not die yet. Not until he knew the eggs would be okay. Danny focused on breathing. In and out. In and out. Every breath was a battle, but he kept fighting. He had to keep fighting. He thought about Kelly, his little sister. She had been only 10 years old when he enlisted, a skinny kid with messy hair and a gap-toothed smile. She had cried when he left, holding onto his leg and begging him not to go. He had promised her he would come back. He had promised her everything would be okay. He had broken that promise. He would never see her again. Never watch her graduate from school. Never meet the person she would marry. Never hold her children in his arms. Tears froze on Danny's cheeks before they could fall. I'm sorry, Kelly, he said. I'm so sorry. But even as he said it, he knew that he would make the same choice again. Because those eggs needed him. Because those unborn dragons had no one else. Because sometimes doing the right thing meant sacrificing everything. And Danny Marsh had never been able to turn away from the right thing. The first egg split open, just as the sun was rising outside. Danny could not see the sunrise, buried as he was beneath the mountain, but he felt it somehow. He felt the world getting slightly warmer, slightly brighter. A tiny dragon tumbled out of the shell and onto the volcanic rock. It was beautiful. Its scales were gold and red like its mother's, and its eyes were huge and dark and full of confusion. It looked at Danny and made a small sound, something between a chirp and a growl. Hey there, Danny whispered. Welcome to the world. Another egg cracked open. Then another. Then another. Within an hour, all 7 dragons had hatched. They were small, each one about the size of a house cat, with wings that were too big for their bodies and tails that kept getting tangled up. They stumbled around the nest, bumping into each other, making those strange chirping sounds. And then they found Danny. He was lying very still now. He did not have the strength to move anymore. His eyes were half closed, his breathing shallow and slow. But he was still warm. Warmer than the stone. Warmer than the air. The dragons crawled over to him. They pressed their small bodies against his, seeking the heat that was fading from his flesh. They did not understand what was happening. They did not understand death. But they understood warmth. They understood comfort, and something deep inside them, something ancient and instinctive, understood sacrifice. Danny felt them curling around him, felt their tiny hearts beating against his skin. He smiled. It was a weak smile, barely a movement of his cracked lips, but it was real. Take care of each other, he said. His voice was so quiet now that he could barely hear it himself. Be good. Be kind. Remember that warmth matters. The dragons chirped and pressed closer. Danny closed his eyes. He thought about Earth one last time. About blue skies and green grass and the sound of rain on a tin roof. About his mother's smile and his father's handshake and Kelly's laugh. About all the beautiful, ordinary things that made life worth living. Then Danny Marsh let go. The cold took him gently, like an old friend offering rest after a long journey. He did not feel any pain. He did not feel any fear. He just felt warm, surrounded by 7 small lives that he had saved. And that was enough. That was more than enough. The dragons stayed with him long after his heart stopped beating. They did not understand why he had gone still. They did not understand why his warmth was fading. But they stayed anyway, huddled together around the strange soft creature who had kept them alive. Outside, the storm continued to rage. Inside, 7 orphan dragons mourned in the only way they knew how. They waited for help that might never come. The month before the bonding ceremony was the hardest of Ethan's life. Every day, he woke before sunrise and studied Kethrani language until his head hurt. He learned their history, their customs, their complicated rules about who could speak to whom and when. He practiced walking in formal robes that felt heavy and strange on his body. He memorized the names of hundreds of noble houses and the feuds between them that stretched back thousands of years that Maya helped him when she could. Testing him on vocabulary and correcting his pronunciation, Dr. Shaw spent hours explaining the hidden meanings behind simple phrases, the tiny insults that could be delivered with a raised eyebrow or a pause in the wrong place. The Kethrani speak with more than words, Dr. Shaw told him one evening. Every gesture, every silence, every movement of the hand carries meaning. You must learn to read them as easily as you read a book. And if I make a mistake, Ethan asked, then they will use that mistake against you. They will say you are too primitive to understand civilized communication. They will use it as proof that humans do not belong among them. Ethan practiced until his muscles ached and his brain felt like it was melting. He made mistakes constantly. He said the wrong words, bowed at the wrong times, moved his hands in ways that meant things he did not intend. But slowly, day by day, he got better. Valera visited him often at the embassy. She was patient and kind, never mocking him for his errors. She told him stories about her childhood and asked questions about Earth. They talked for hours about nothing important. And Ethan found himself looking forward to her visits more than anything else. "You are learning faster than I expected," she told him one afternoon. They sat in the embassy garden, a small patch of alien plants that the previous ambassador had tried to make feel like home. "Most Kethrani children take years to learn what you have learned in weeks." "I have good motivation," Ethan said. "I do not want to embarrass you in front of your entire empire." Valera smiled. "You could never embarrass me. But I am glad you are working so hard. It will make things easier when the time comes." The bonding ceremony approached like a storm on the horizon. Invitations went out to every corner of the Galactic Compact. Representatives from dozens of species confirmed their attendance, most of them coming to witness what they expected to be a disaster. A human marrying Kethrani royalty was the biggest news in the galaxy. Everyone wanted to see it happen. The ceremony was held in the Grand Temple, the oldest building in the capital city. It was made of black stone that absorbed light instead of reflecting it. Inside, thousands of candles burned on golden stands, casting flickering shadows on the walls. The air smelled of incense and something sweeter, a flower that Ethan did not recognize. He stood at the front of the temple in formal robes of silver and blue, the colors of the royal house. His heart beat fast in his chest, but he kept his face calm. Maya stood nearby with a group of human diplomats. Watching with worried eyes, Dr. Shaw stood beside her, his old face showing quiet pride. Valera entered through the main doors, and for a moment, Ethan forgot how to breathe. She wore a gown of pure white that seemed to glow in the candlelight. Her dark hair was piled on her head in an elaborate arrangement decorated with tiny silver stars. She walked slowly, gracefully, her silver eyes fixed on Ethan as if he was the only person in the room. She was beautiful. Not just in an alien way, not just in a way that was strange and different. She was beautiful in a way that made his chest hurt. They met at the altar, where an ancient priest waited to perform the ceremony. The old Kethrani spoke words in a language so old that even Ethan's studies had not covered it. He and Valera repeated the words as best they could, their voices blending together in the quiet of the temple. Then, just as the priest reached for the ceremonial cup that would seal their bond, a voice rang out through the temple. "I invoke the right of worthiness." Everyone turned. Prince Counselor Draven stepped forward from the crowd, his face twisted with cruel satisfaction. He wore black robes decorated with silver thorns, and his eyes burned with hatred as he looked at Ethan. By ancient law, Draven continued, any noble may demand that a foreign consort prove their value before bonding with Kathrani royalty. I make this demand now before all these witnesses. A murmur swept through the crowd. Valera's face went pale, and her hands trembled. Uncle, she said, her voice tight with anger, you cannot do this. The ceremony has already begun. The ceremony is not complete until the cup is drunk, Draven replied smoothly. I am within my rights. The law is clear. The ancient priest bowed his head. The Prince Counselor speaks truth. The right of worthiness may be invoked at any time before the bonding is sealed. What trial do you demand? Draven's smile widened. The Crucible of Shadows. This time, the murmur became a roar. Voices rose from every corner of the temple, shocked and angry and afraid. Ethan did not know what the Crucible of Shadows was, but from the reaction, he knew it was bad. No. Valera stepped forward, her voice rising above the noise. The Crucible has not been used in centuries. It is barbaric. It has killed more challengers than it has passed. Then your consort should have no trouble proving himself, if he is truly worthy. Draven spread his hands in mock innocence. Unless, of course, he wishes to withdraw. No one would blame him for being afraid. The temple fell silent. Every eye turned to Ethan. He felt the weight of their stares pressing down on him, felt the judgment of 1,000 alien minds. They expected him to run. They expected him to fail. He thought about Valera, who had lost everything and still refused to give up. He thought about humanity, watching from 1,000,000 light years away, waiting to see if one of their own could stand among the stars. He thought about all the people who had ever been told they were not good enough. I accept the challenge, he said. Valera grabbed his arm. Ethan, no. You do not understand. The Crucible is ritual combat. You will fight a Kathrani champion who is trained since childhood. Their warriors are stronger and faster than humans. You will die. Then I will die trying. Ethan covered her hand with his own. But I will not run. I will not give them the satisfaction. Draven laughed. How touching. A human with courage. Let us see how long that courage lasts. The trial was set for 3 days later. Until then, Ethan was taken to special quarters in the palace, guarded but not imprisoned. The law required that the challenger be given time to prepare. Maya and Dr. Shaw came to see him that night. Maya was furious, pacing back and forth across the small room like a trapped animal. This is insane, she said. We need to contact Earth. We need to get you out of here. I cannot leave, Ethan said quietly. If I run, Valera loses everything. The noble houses win. Draven takes the throne. Everything we have worked for disappears. And if you die, then at least I died fighting. Dr. Shaw sat in the corner, studying a datapad with intense concentration. He had been quiet since they arrived, reading and thinking and calculating. There may be a way, he said finally. Maya stopped pacing. What do you mean? I have been studying the rules of the Crucible. Dr. Shaw held up the datapad. It is a very old ritual with very strict rules. The combat continues until one fighter surrenders or can no longer continue. There is no time limit. No weapon restrictions. Just two bodies fighting until one falls. That does not sound like good news, Maya said. The Kathrani developed this ritual for Kathrani warriors, Dr. Shaw continued. Their champions are trained to strike fast and hard, to end fights quickly. They are built for short bursts of intense combat, not for long battles. Ethan leaned forward. What are you saying? Humans are different. We are not as strong or as fast, but we have something they do not have. Endurance. Humans can take more damage and keep going. Humans can push through pain that would cripple other species. Our bodies are built for persistence, not power. Maya's eyes widened. You are saying he does not need to win. He just needs to survive. Exactly. Dr. Shaw smiled. If Ethan can stay on his feet long enough, the Kathrani champion will exhaust himself. He will slow down. He will make mistakes. And if Ethan can outlast him, then I win, Ethan finished. Not by being stronger, but by refusing to fall. It was not much of a plan. It was desperate and dangerous and probably foolish. But it was something. It was hoped Ethan spent the next 3 days training. He did not try to learn how to fight like a Kathrani. He did not have time for that. Instead, he trained his body to take punishment. He practiced getting hit and getting up. He practiced breathing through pain. He practiced the one thing that humans had always been good at, not giving up. On the morning of the crucible, Valera came to see him. Her silver eyes were red from crying, and she looked like she had not slept. I am so sorry, she whispered. I never wanted this. I never wanted to put you in danger. Ethan took her hands in his. They had grown comfortable with each other over the past month. Not quite friends, not quite lovers, but something in between. Something that could grow into more if they were given the chance. You did not do this, he said. Your uncle did. And I'm going to make sure he regrets it. How can you be so calm? Ethan smiled. I am terrified. But I have been terrified before. Fear does not have to stop you. It just means you care about what happens next. Valera pulled him into an embrace. She held him tight, her alien body warm against his. The Crucible Arena was older than the Empire itself, that it sat in the heart of the capital city, a massive stone circle that had seen 1,000 battles and 1,000 deaths. The floor was covered with dark sand that had absorbed so much blood over the centuries that it had turned a deep brown color. Stone seats rose in rings around the fighting floor, packed with spectators from across the Galactic Compact. They had come to watch a human die. Ethan walked into the arena wearing simple white clothes, the traditional outfit of a crucible challenger. The fabric was thin and offered no protection. He was barefoot, his hands empty. No weapons were allowed. This fight would be settled with fists and bodies alone. The crowd fell silent as he entered. Then the whispers started. He could not hear the words, but he knew what they were saying. Primitive, weak, foolish. They looked at him like he was an animal that had wandered into a place it did not belong. On the far side of the arena, his opponent waited. Kalen was the most famous warrior in the Kathrani Empire. He stood almost 7 feet tall, with muscles that looked like they were carved from purple stone. His violet skin was covered with scars from a lifetime of combat. He had won 11 crucibles and had never lost a single fight. The betting houses were offering odds of 50 to 1 against the human. Ethan looked at this monster of a warrior and felt fear crawl through his chest like ice water. Kalen could break him in half without effort. He could crush him like an insect. Every instinct in Ethan's body screamed at him to run. He did not run. Prince. Councillor Draven sat in the royal box with Valera beside him. She was forced to watch by tradition, unable to help, unable to look away. Her face was pale, and her hands gripped the arms of her chair until her knuckles turned white. Draven looked pleased. He had already won, and everyone knew it. This fight was just entertainment, a way to humiliate humanity before the whole galaxy. The ancient referee stepped into the center of the arena. He raised his hands, and the crowd grew quiet. The Crucible of Shadows begins now, he announced. The fight continues until one warrior surrenders or can no longer continue. May the worthy prevail. He stepped back, and the battle began. Kalen moved faster than anything Ethan had ever seen. One moment, he was across the arena. The next moment, His fist was buried in Ethan's stomach. The pain was beyond anything Ethan had experienced. He flew backward, hit the sand hard, and for a moment could not breathe. The world spun around him in a blur of colors and sounds. The crowd roared with savage joy. Kalen stood over him, waiting. The Kethrani warrior looked almost disappointed. Was this really all the human could offer? Ethan got up, took everything he had. His stomach felt like it was on fire, and his lungs burned with every breath. But he pushed himself to his feet and raised his hands again. The crowd fell silent. Kalen struck again, a blow to the chest that cracked ribs like dry twigs. Ethan went down. The pain was so intense that black spots danced in his vision. He thought about his mother, his sister, the green hills of Ohio. He thought about how easy it would be to just stay down. He got up. The fight became a nightmare. Kalen hit him again and again, each blow more powerful than the last. He broke Ethan's nose. He split his lip. He struck his ribs until Ethan could feel them grinding together with every movement. And every time he fell, Ethan got up. After the first hour, something strange happened. The crowd stopped cheering. They watched in growing silence as this human, this primitive creature from a nothing world, refused to stay on the ground. They had never seen anything like it. Their warriors fought with speed and power, striking to end battles quickly. They were not built for this kind of punishment, but this human just kept rising. Blood covered Ethan's face and chest. He could barely see through his swollen eyes. Each breath was agony. His left leg had given out halfway through the fight, so he stood on his right alone, swaying like a tree in a storm. But he stood. Kalen was breathing hard now. His strikes were slower, less precise. Sweat poured down his purple skin. He had fought for an hour straight, using all his power, and his opponent was still standing. It was impossible. It was unnatural. It was terrifying. Why will you not fall? Kalen demanded. His voice was hoarse with exhaustion. What is wrong with you? Ethan spat blood onto the sand. His voice came out as a broken whisper, but everyone in the silent arena heard it. Humans do not fall. We never learn how. He raised his broken hands and waited. The second hour was worse than the first. Kalen kept attacking, but his movements were sluggish now. His arms felt like they were filled with sand. Each punch took more effort than the last. Ethan took them all. He fell and rose, again and again. The sand beneath him was dark with blood, most of it his own. He could not feel his left arm anymore. He was pretty sure some of his internal organs were damaged. He was dying slowly, one blow at a time, but he was still standing in the royal box. The Lyra was weeping openly. She could not look away, could not close her eyes. She watched the human she had grown to care for being destroyed piece by piece, and she was helpless to stop it. Draven was no longer smiling. His face showed something that might have been uncertainty or even fear. This was not supposed to happen. The human was supposed to break. The third hour began. Kalen stumbled. His legs, designed for short bursts of combat, could no longer support him properly. He threw a punch that was almost gentle compared to his earlier strikes. Ethan took it on the shoulder and barely moved. "Surrender," Kalen gasped. He was bent over, hands on his knees, struggling to breathe. "Please, I do not want to kill you. Just surrender." Ethan looked at him through swollen eyes. He thought about Valera waiting in the stands. He thought about humanity watching from across the stars. He thought about everyone who had ever been told they were not good enough. No. Kalen raised his fist for another strike. His arm trembled. He took a step forward, and his leg gave out. The greatest warrior in the Kethrani Empire fell to his knees in the sand. He tried to rise. His body refused. "I cannot," he whispered. His voice was barely audible. I cannot continue. The arena was absolutely silent. Then the ancient referee stepped forward, his face showing shock that he could not hide. Kalen of House Varth is unable to continue, he announced. His voice trembled slightly. The crucible is complete. Ethan Cole is victorious. For a long moment, nothing happened. The galaxy watched, holding its collective breath. Then, from the common sections of the arena, where the workers and servants and soldiers sat, a voice rose. Human! 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 More voices joined in. The chant spread like fire, growing louder and stronger until it shook the ancient stones. The common people of the Kethrani Empire were cheering for a human. It had never happened before in all of history. Valera broke free from the royal box and ran across the sand. She caught Ethan just as his legs finally gave out. She held him in her arms, her tears falling on his broken face. "You impossible creature," she whispered. "You actually did it." "Told you," Ethan managed. His voice was weak, his consciousness fading. "I do not stay down. Save your strength. The healers are coming. Did we win?" Valera looked up at Draven, who sat frozen in the royal box. His plans had crumbled to dust. His champion had fallen. The entire galaxy had just watched a human do the impossible. "Yes," she said softly. "We won." In the human embassy, Maya and Dr. Shaw stood before a view screen, watching the broadcast. Tears streamed down Maya's face. Dr. Shaw's hands were shaking. "He did it," Maya whispered. "The crazy fool actually did it." "He showed them," Dr. Shaw said. His voice was thick with emotion. "He showed the whole galaxy what humans are made of." Across human space, billions watched a broken man refuse to fall. They watched him take blow after blow and rise every single time. They watched him prove that humanity's greatest strength was not technology or power, but something far more precious: the refusal to give up. The bonding ceremony was completed 3 days later, after Ethan had recovered enough to stand. He was still covered in bandages, still barely able to walk, but he stood beside Valera at the altar and spoke the ancient words. When they drank from the ceremonial cup, the common people who had gathered outside the temple cheered so loudly that the sound echoed through the city. They called him the Human Prince, the one who would not fall. They painted murals of his bloodied face on walls throughout the capital. Draven disappeared shortly after the ceremony. Some said he fled to the outer colonies. Others said he simply vanished, unable to face the shame of his failure. On their first night as bonded partners, Valera and Ethan stood in the observatory tower, looking at the stars. "Do you regret it?" she asked him. "Leaving everything behind for me?" Ethan took her hand in his bandaged one. He looked at the distant point of light that was Earth's sun, so far away that the light took years to reach him. "I gave up a lot," he admitted. "But I gained something too. A chance to prove that humans matter. A chance to change how the galaxy sees us." He turned to look at her, at those silver mirror eyes that he had grown to love. "A chance to be with you." Valera leaned against him carefully, mindful of his injuries. "What happens now?" "I do not know. Your uncle is still out there. The noble houses still hate us. We have enemies everywhere we look." Ethan smiled, even though it hurt his broken face to do it. "But we are still standing." "As long as we are,"